Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening and welcome to the August 17th regular meeting of the West Turlock Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Agency Board of Directors. I now call this meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Members of the board are participating in tonight's meeting in person from the TID boardroom located at 333 East Canal Drive, Turlock. Members of the public may participate in person, utilize the Zoom's webinar feature, or by telephone. Members of the public attending virtually will have the opportunity to provide public comment via the webinar or phone features. For those participating via Zoom, please click the raise hand button on your screen. For those participating via phone, please dial *9 on the keypad. Once your name or other identifying information is called by the board secretary, your line will be unmuted and the public comment period will begin. With that, we'll move on to the flag salute. Will everyone stand and face the flag? Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you. We'll now call the roll of board members. Ms. Land, will you call roll, please?
Director Alvarez. Director Bixel.
Here.
Director Chiesa.
Here.
Director Crooker.
Here.
Director Espinoza.
Here.
Alternate Director Lindo.
Here.
Director Maldonado.
Here.
And Vice Chair Juritzma.
Here.
Thank you very much.
And we do have a quorum, so we can continue on with our agenda. Item D, public comment period. Interested persons in the audience are welcome to introduce any topic within the agency's jurisdiction. No action may be undertaken on any item not appearing on the posted agenda, except that the board may briefly respond to comments, refer the matter to staff, or request it be placed on a future agenda. Is there any member of the public wishing to make comment right now? I see none here. Anyone online or on phone?
No members online.
Great, thank you. Then we will move on. Staff updates. Budget update. Mr. Clipper.
Everyone. For the basin account for July 31st, 2023, we had an ending balance of $903,309.04. For the West Turlock specific account, we had an ending balance of $493,743.33. All the invoices have gone out, and we're starting to receive payments. So this is not reflective of any of this year's contributions.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Clipper? No.
Thank you.
Next, we've got an update from the other Michael Cook, on the Technical Advisory Committee.
Good evening, Vice Chair Juritzma, members of the board. Just a few updates. Are the grants we received to prepare the groundwater sustainability plan and the environmental impact report have been closed out. The Department of Water Resources did a review of our grant administration processes and gave us a very high marks, which should help us in our future applications to them. So well done to everybody, Debbie in particular, who worked on administering that grant. We also applied for a grant earlier this year for Sigma implementation. As you know, initially it looked like we haven't been successful. We did provide comments on how we were ranked and scored, and Department of Water Resources is reviewing those comments and expected to have final awards posted as early as September. So we're hoping we're still in the game, but we don't know for sure. We'll find out later in September. East Turlock received a land repurposing grant from the Department of Conservation. This is for them to prepare a plan to look at transitioning some agricultural areas into other uses, such as recharge basins, return it to the wild, solar arrays, things like that. So it's for the entire subbasin. It will be focused mainly on the East Turlock area, but we will be participating with them to see if there are things we can collaborate on through that process.
Michael, how much was that for, that grant? Do you know?
Grant?
It's enough to do a serious study.
Serious effort, yeah. And they're talking about bringing ag economists into the table and working with disadvantaged communities, all kinds of stuff. So it's a really good program. And it's a good way for them to get started on their GSP implementation. Just a few days ago, literally, we heard about a potential grant that's out there related to climate change, and we thought this might be an opportunity to do some work on domestic well mitigation. So we're required as part of our plan to look at the impacts of groundwater levels, how it's affecting domestic wells in rural areas. And we know climate change is affecting the amount of surface water available to TID, more groundwater pumping. And so it's kind of, it's a very short turnaround. It's the end of this month. We don't know necessarily if we're a good fit. We are keeping an eye on that, and it might be worth a quick Hail Mary at. So I'll keep you posted. We may need to get some approvals from the board to submit that application. But I'll keep you informed. It just seems like an opportunity, and I apologize for the quick turnaround, but sometimes these things happen. And then we will, later this year, be bidding out the construction of a number of groundwater monitoring wells. In our GSP, we found there's areas of the basin where we need more information about what's going on below our feet. And sometimes we use production wells, so pumping wells, to measure groundwater depths, but sometimes if they haven't been turned off long enough, you get bad results. So we're trying to get dedicated wells. They're basically holes in the ground that stay there forever that we can constantly monitor to see the depth of groundwater. And so we've been putting money away through the GSP, and Michael has, to construct those wells. We were hoping to get a grant so we could use that money for something else, but it looks like we're not going to get the grant. So we'll be using some of those funds to construct the wells, and hopefully we'll start with that later this year and into the spring. We have a new point of contact with Department of Water Resources, and he doesn't appear to be on Zoom, Dimitri, but hopefully in the future we can introduce you to our new representative from the Department of Water Resources, who basically oversees what we're up to and he acts as a resource to us, what's going on with DWR. I'd like to, at this point, if I could, turn over to Valerie Kincaid to give an update of what's going on statewide in terms of review of the groundwater sustainability plans. But before I hand it over to her, are there any questions for me of what I covered tonight?
Questions for Mr. Cook?
Yeah. Michael, on these grant applications, I don't think any one of our jurisdictions have ever sent letters of support, have they? Or do we just send one from this group?
There have been in the past letters of support for some of the other grants. For this one, it's a really tight turnaround, and it would be an application between the two GSAs, which represents a lot of the water entities. And we might reach out. We're trying to figure it out at this point. Literally, we just turned about it on Friday.
I would just prepare a letter that everyone can, if nothing else, we can, at least I have the ability to sign as a district rep. I don't have to go through the board. And maybe everyone else could do that for quick turnaround.
I think the last 2 or 3 grants we've had, cities and water districts provide letters of support, and other, chambers of commerce too. So it's a great idea. We'll keep you posted, and those little things do make a difference. So we'll keep on top of that.
Thanks, Michael. Valerie Kincaid, West Turlock, GSA Council. So I'm going to talk a little bit about DWR and where they're at in the SGMA process. I think most people know that we turned in our plan very close to 2 years ago, and DWR has until this January 2024, the very last day, to provide us a determination of whether we are adequate or inadequate. Those are kind of the pass or fail lingo of SGMA. Statewide, DWR keeps putting out determinations for other subbasins. At the subbasin level, so far, DWR has approved 40 subbasins. So sometimes there are multiple plans in a subbasin, but they do it kind of on a subbasin level. So for 40 of the subbasins in the state, they've gotten an approval, an adequacy determination. There have been 6 inadequacy determinations so far. So far, DWR is through 46 subbasins, and they have 43 remaining subbasins to make determinations on. So we're one of the 43 subbasins left to be determined. Just to kind of put that in perspective, they started rolling out those determinations. When they first got those plans in 2020, they reviewed them. So they started rolling those out right around 2022. So we have a couple more months, and we have about half the basins to go. So timing-wise, DWR has a lot of work to do, and my sense is that they think that they're going to roll out more plans on a quarterly basis. So they're going to have to kind of speed up how many subbasins they get through and how quickly they do that. I have not heard that those deadlines will slip, so we can probably still expect some response from DWR. Remember that initially they had 12 subbasins that had an incomplete as well, so that's an option as well. So you can get inadequate. They did have 12 basins that were incomplete. Out of those 12, 6 made it past the finish line and got into the adequacy, and 6, of course, are now deemed inadequate. From a very high level perspective, I won't get into the weeds on the inadequate subbasins. I hope we're not either in the incomplete or inadequate category when we do receive our determination. But remember that those subbasins are now going to the State Water Resources Control Board. They switch from DWR to the State Water Board. The State Water Board has held 2 different informational hearings about those basins with inadequate plans. And I think from a very high level perspective, the process there is confusing at best. You don't want to be in that group. And there's this handoff from DWR to the State Water Board where there's a significant amount of confusion. And remember, that's the point also where the State Water Board has the opportunity to hold a probationary hearing. And if you're in probation, it switches from a GSA level of control to where the State Water Board then has a relationship with every well owner in the subbasin, and you will report and pay fees directly to the State Water Board. So right now we're in a great position where our GSAs are really representing all the well owners, and we are kind of representing to DWR. Those 6 subbasins that are in the inadequate category are now facing this switch from local control to state control at a wellhead basis. So it's a pretty serious, switch over in Sigma. I will tell you that in those subbasins, that's surprising still to a lot of people. So again, fingers crossed that we won't be in that. But there are a lot of folks in those 6 subbasins that are really considering, whether they're going to maintain local control. It's certainly a question. The State Water Board has laid out a schedule for who will go first. And right now the schedule looks like Tulare Lake Basin is first up, will be the first basin that goes probationary. Tule is second, Kauai, Kern, Chowchilla, Delta Mendota. So that's the 6. That's how they're going to do it. Not that it really matters that much, but that first Tulare Lake Basin, something was supposed to be out yesterday to get them started on that probationary process. So I don't think we're slipping by a lot, but we haven't seen anything yet. So schedules may already be slipping on that component. But statewide, that's what's going on. And I think we should keep our fingers crossed and certainly keep our communication with DWR ongoing. Any questions?
Be adequate more than I do right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So all of them went into the incomplete rather than inadequate to start out with.
That's right.
Are most of those because information was missing or the numbers didn't add up or, how they tried to?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So 4 out of the 6 subbasins have pretty significant impacts on the ground, meaning that the State Water Board had a presentation and they have a lot of dry wells. They've got increasingly dry wells, a significant amount of subsidence. So the State Water Board looked and said, we don't think your plans are great, and also it seems like things on the ground aren't going great for you. So that's 4 of the subbasins, all of the subbasins except for Delta Mendota and Kern. And in Delta Mendota and Kern, the State Water Board said, you don't have, horrible conditions on the ground, but clearly you've had a really hard time coordinating. Both of those basins had, 6 plans. And I think they had the issue where you had 6 plans and everyone had their own accounting. And if you tallied up the numbers and the data, you weren't necessarily getting the same picture. So someone's either double counting water, double counting recharge. I think at that point with the 6 plans, it just wasn't believable. The picture that those 6 plans kind of pitched to DWR said, I don't think you're coordinated. I don't think you guys are kind of speaking the same language and using the same data and methodologies. So you had 4 subbasins who were in kind of a bad way and then 2 that just didn't coordinate.
So they essentially just need an arbitrator to allocate to each one of the districts correctly, more so than
Yeah, I mean, they definitely need something. I know Delta Mendota has interestingly come together and said, you know what, we're going to scrap those 6 plans. We're going to try to do one plan. So they have a memorandum of agreement right now in that subbasin. I think it's going to be very difficult. Don't get me wrong. I think it's going to be a tough road. But they have at least made the outward-looking decision of, you know, if coordination's our problem, let's scrap all those. Let's do one plan and kind of keep our dirty laundry in-house. Kern has not made that decision yet. And so I think that's one of the reasons the Delta Mendota Basin is towards the last, is that the State Water Board has said, you know, it seems like you're heading in the right direction. We're going to give you what it will probably be over a year to get that plan together and back to us before we get probationary hearing going. Yeah.
Any additional questions?
Okay, thanks.
Michael, you're all done too? Yeah? Okay. All right. Then we will move on to the consent calendar. Information concerning the consent calendar items has been included within the agenda packet. All items listed below will be acted upon in a single roll call vote by the board, by the WTS GSA board. There will be no individual discussion of these items unless a member of the board or public has questions concerning an item, at which time the item will be removed for separate consideration by the board. Seeing as that, we just have the one item, I would entertain a motion.
So move. Second.
Mr. Chiesa, second by Mr. Bixel. Okay, we've got a first and second. Is this a roll call vote?
I'm happy to do roll call for you. If you
Okay,
want.
let's do that, please.
Director Alvarez? Yes. Director Bixel? Yes. Director Chiesa?
Yes.
Director Crooker?
Yes.
Director Espinoza?
Yes.
Alternate Director Lindo? Director Maldonado?
Yes.
Vice Chair Juritzma?
Yes. Motion passes. Moving on, item G, data release disclaimer and authorized use of the groundwater model. Once again, Ms. Kincaid.
So in your packet, you have a resolution, and included in that resolution is a data release disclaimer. And the purpose of this is that the 2 GSAs, along with DWR funding, took the C2V SIM model that DWR had and populated it with specific kind of fine grid localized data, and came up with the Turlock model that is based on the C2V SIM model. And it's a great tool. And so, both the GSAs kind of co-jointly own and control that model. There are member districts, TID being one, that would like to use that model to look at other projects that they have coming up. And the whole purpose of this is to allow member agencies of the GSAs who funded the model access to use that model with, frankly, some kind of bumpers on the use. The idea is, you know, it's the basis of the GSP, and although we want people to use the model and have access to it, we don't want them going in, changing data sets, kind of doing things to undermine the analysis that was built by the model in the GSP. So basically, you have a general release that the GSAs both talked about at the TAC, and I think both supported, and now it's coming to you, where if a requesting agency wants to use the C2V SIM Turlock model, it will do this release that says, you know, we won't populate this with crazy data, we won't publish it, we won't say that the model is deficient in these ways. If we find errors or things that need to be taken care of, we'll do that collaboratively. We're not going to basically undermine the technical basis upon which the GSP was built. And so that's the disclaimer. So this is really just kind of a tool to allow member agencies access to use the model in a way that's collaborative and doesn't undermine the GSP. So I know I just said a lot, and it's in your packet, but I'm happy to take questions or thoughts.
Thoughts, questions? Okay, with that, I would, this is a resolution, but I'll entertain a motion. I've got a motion by Miguel, a second by Mr. Lindo. This is a roll call vote, so Madam Secretary.
Thank you. Director Alvarez? Yes. Director Bixel?
Yes.
Director Chiesa?
Yes.
Director Crooker?
Yes.
Director Espinoza,
Yes.
Alternate Director Lindo, Director Maldonado, Vice Chair Juritzma.
Yes. Motion passes. Okay, we will move on to comments from the board. Any board members wishing to make comment? Okay, with that, we will adjourn to closed session at 6:20. And when we wrap that up, we'll report back here. But for now, we'll jump into closed session. Okay, we are returning from closed session at 6:35. The board was updated, and there is no reportable action that was taken in closed session. So with that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment. Got a motion? A second? Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thanks, y'all.